Hey all, Steve Bailey here, and I'm going to talk about something that gets talked about too much and not enough all at the same time. Strings. And I'm not talking about brands, but what I'm talking about is on fretless bass, most of you naturally assume that one would play flatwounds on a fretless. And I've been told everything for decades and decades because roundwounds are kind of like, they're like files and they tear up the fingerboard or whatever. Flatwounds are smoother. But here's the thing. I always say, tell me your 4 or 5 favorite fretless bass players. And of course, everybody says Jaco Pastorius. And a lot of people will say Gary Willis. They'll talk about Pino Palladino way back in the Paul Young days. And the list goes on. And the thing that they all have in common is they use roundwound strings. It kind of started with Jaco, of being able to get the harmonics and get the growl. So I use roundwounds, as do most professional fretless bass players. Now, having said that, the flatwounds have a unique sound, but they don't get that classic kind of fretless wah and growl that the roundwounds get. These are roundwounds, and here's how I can tell the difference. This is kind of a joke, but not really. That's what roundwounds sound like. Here's what flatwounds sound like. Roundwound, flatwound. So, having said that, the roundwound is wound on the outside of the core of the string, and there are tiny ridges in them. The flatwounds, they're either ground down, or I'm not sure how they make them flat, but the surface of the string is much more smooth. You don't hear that kind of noise, and definitely not that kind of noise on a roundwound. But I love the sound of roundwounds because they do this. And they sustain longer. And flatwounds, surprisingly, are more common on a fretted bass. If you love James Jamerson and Carol Kay and some of the sounds from the 60s and 70s, or maybe even Joe Dart, I know when I'm recording and I'm using an old vintage bass and I want a vintage tone, I definitely put on flatwounds. But on a fretless bass, it's not flatwounds, it's roundwounds. I'm sure there are some, but all of my favorite fretless bass players use roundwounds. That's why. So, if anybody asks you what you use, hopefully you'll be using roundwounds if that's the sound you're going for. So experiment for yourself. It's one way or the other, but don't assume that it's fretless and it must be flatwounds, because that's just not the case. That's a roundwound. Good topic. Hey all, this is Steve Bailey, and once again I want to remind you to please check out our YouTube channel, our socials, and while you're there, make sure you subscribe because there's all kinds of great content. Education, information, entertainment, and edutainment, which is kind of like teaching and being funny at the same time. Don't know anything about that, but please check it out, and lots of love from all of us here at Warwick.